If chords are colorful structures, then thirds are primary colors and bricks. They stack to form chords and reveal the nature of a chord's affect, also known in musical circles as a chord's quality. When you know what thirds are, they explain nearly everything you wanted to know about every chord you're likely going to encounter in the music you love. Today, we'll talk about the nature of thirds, how they are used in the most popular chords, and as such, lay the groundwork for ear training, which we will explore in depth throughout the rest of this module. Get ready for a big video. In our last video, we talked about the different intervals that come already embedded within the major scale, right in front of our faces. We briefly touched on the perfect unison, the major second, the major third, the perfect fourth, the perfect fifth, the major sixth, the major seventh, and the perfect octave, which naturally occur in the major scale. And there is so much more to say about each of these intervals or relationships, but we'll leave some of it for episodes 4 and 8 and save the rest for another video in the future. I told you this was going to be a huge series. If you wish to explore the topic of intervals because it sparked something in you, I encourage you. Play with them. Use them in your songwriting. If you're playing guitar, try this. Tune your guitar to drop D and play the 6th and 5th strings together as you move around on the 5th string. Listen to the different combinations you get and try identifying them in songs you love. My advice for this would be to start with simpler songs. The fewer instruments the song has and the more sparse the arrangement is, the better. And if you have any trouble with them, you can always check out episode 7 of the melody module, where I talk about how to approach interval recognition from the beginning. But for all this talk of intervals today, we are really most concerned with one of them, the third. The third is the best one to start with because this simple concept unlocks so much about the world of harmony, it's almost scary. A third is the relationship between any two notes with 3 consecutive scale degrees in between them. I'll show you exactly what it looks like. If we look to the major scale, I did it on the first try.
Yeah, that's good.
If we look to the major scale, the first example of a third we see is 1 and 3. Let's see how 1 and 3 sound in the key of C major. If you notice, it has a pleasant, bright, or open quality to it. It leans toward the consonant side of the consonance-dissonance spectrum. But a third is bigger than just 1 and 3. As I just mentioned in my definition, it can be any two notes with 3 scale degrees in between. In the major scale, that means 2 and 4 combine to make a third, and so do 3 and 5, as well as 4 and 6, and 5 and 7, 6 and 8, and lastly 7 and 9, which is just the 2 above the 8. Remember, 8 is just a higher 1, and 9 is just a higher 2. If you're confused about any of this, definitely check out the melody module. Still available. Now I'll show you all of them in writing. Now here's how each of them sound in sequence. Pretty. You might notice if I isolate a few of them that they share something in terms of their quality. Despite the fact that these thirds each use different scale degrees, all three of these thirds share the same pleasant, bright, or open quality between them. And if I isolate the rest, you'll also hear that they share a quality. Although it's not a quality I would call pleasant, bright, or open. Do you hear how different they are from the first group? I think of them as more introspective, darker, or closed sounding. They lean more on the dissonant side of the spectrum. But how about you? How would you describe the quality that these thirds share? If we notice the difference between the two, then an obvious theory question arises. How is it that these thirds over here share the same quality, but these thirds over here share another quality? What makes them different? If we look to the major scale once again, the answer is already embedded. While 1 and 3, 4 and 6, and 5 and 7 each have a relationship of 4 half steps or semitones in between them. 2 and 4, 3 and 5, 6 and 8, and 7 and 9 each have a relationship of 3 half steps in between them. It's the reason Dollars and Cents by Radiohead sounds the way it does. A dreamy haze slipping in and out of different moods. You can try it yourself by playing a major third starting on this B, and then there's the major third note that makes it a major third, and then drop the upper note by a half step to create a minor third starting on B. Whoa, Warren, do you mean to tell me that 1 half step this way is enough to make me feel strange or creeped out, but that 1 half step the other way is enough to make me feel comfortable or relaxed? Yes, and more. This is why we have the WARRENMUSIC grid, or at least a very basic form of it. Trust me, it gets more awesome. At this level, the grid promotes an appreciation for the half steps that ultimately give shape to every melody and harmony you'll probably ever hear. I've included an interactive video you can use to bounce around the major scale in thirds. Try it out below and listen for the difference between the two groups, major thirds and minor thirds. For kids who were born in the 80s, you might remember a show on Nickelodeon with a theme song that highlights thirds, beginning on 1 and moving up successively. It was called Rugrats. Sounds pretty close, doesn't it? Now to make things easier for harmony, instead of referring to thirds as 1 and 3 or 3 and 5, we can classify them by their position within the third instead, by just calling each of these a root. The other note would be known as a third or a flat third. This is in contrast to 1 and 3 or 3 and 5, which are degrees of a scale. Rather, the root or the third are degrees of a chord. A slight change in language actually yields a lot of musical insight. This also means that major and minor thirds can be played anywhere. You can play a major third starting from here, or a minor third starting from here. They don't have to be played in the order in which they're found in the major scale. Major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, minor. Those are just the diatonic thirds, whereas dollars and cents employs thirds in a chromatic way. Now, what does chromatic mean? Chromatic simply means all the chroma, aka colors, which refers to all 12 tones in the octave, versus diatonic, which just means the notes that belong to a particular scale. Thirds are an incredible world of sound, using just these diatonic thirds, the ones presented in the major scale. We can enhance and thicken melodies like Radiohead's Let Down. Let down and hanging around. We can create ambient textures like in Bala Macabre's Seabirds. Or even outline entire chord progressions in songs, like in Radiohead's Reckoner. Can't take it with you. Just to give you a sample, I've included segments from popular songs written out in thirds, so you can try them for yourself. Now, I could go on and on about thirds, as I'm sure you're aware by now, how they show up everywhere, for example, from classical to country, shoegaze to sadcore, dubstep to witch house, or even overtone singing if that's your thing. But I'll risk being a touch less than absolutely thorough to bring us to the final subject of this video in a semi-timely fashion: how thirds are used in the most popular chords that we know. Thirds are only two-note sets known as diads, but when we stack thirds on top of each other, we start to create the most popular chords known to man, aka triads. For example, when we stack 1 and 3 and 3 and 5, we get 1, 3, 5. AKA a major triad, C major in the key of C to be specific. And the next combination, 2, 4, 6, which gives us the D minor triad. And when we go through the entire scale, we get the triad chart I've created for you, which is included together with the samples of popular songs I mentioned, all found below. You'll see in the chart that not only are there major triads and minor triads, but also a diminished triad already embedded within the major scale. You'll also see that these popular chords have chord numerals associated with them, which are simply Roman numerals written in upper or lower case to show their major, minor, and diminished qualities, which together form a sort of shorthand for harmony. In the key of C major, for example, as I already mentioned, the 1 is a C major, the 2 is a D minor, the 3 is an E minor, the 4 is an F, the 5 is a G, the 6 is an A minor, and the 7 is a B diminished. And this order of triads, major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, follows for every major key. Now go through it, digest it, memorize it, watch this video as many times as you have to get it in your head. If you know the order of the triads embedded within the major scale, you know the most likely chords that will show up in popular songs. Ready to go in the event you need to learn a chord progression by ear. We'll talk more about how to self-teach when it comes to real-world chord progressions in the rest of this module as well. Now let's imagine we're in the key of A and you've gotten decent at spelling out different keys by now. What would the 1 be in the key of A? A major. And what would the 6 be? F sharp minor. And what would the 4 be in the key of A? D major. And the 5? E major. And now you're being asked to play the 1 for 8 counts, the 6 for 8 counts, the 4 for 4 counts, the 5 for 4 counts, and finally the 1 again for 8 counts. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you have a song. Hit it, Kevin.
When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon will be only like we'll see. No, I won't be afraid.
Try spelling out the names of each triad in each key I've listed alongside the chart. This will help you play countless songs on guitar if you already know bar chords especially. Because once you know the 1 of a song, you automatically know all of the chords that are likely to show up in that song. In the next 2 videos, we'll learn about 2 very important things about vertical harmony and horizontal harmony. We'll begin to identify root position chords, inversions, voicings, and chord progressions, all by ear. And we'll also learn about what makes our favorite chord progressions work. Hop over to warrenlane.com to enjoy the rest of this module, interact with other learners, and get the most out of the harmony you love.